Carol.
Hi, Sarah.
It is really awesome to have this opportunity to sit here with you.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed working in Christian Peacemaker teams with you. And I remember the first time that I heard you speak. I wasn't there, but I got the cassette tape from my church to listen to your testimony about the ways in which CPT and you and being in this neighborhood where we are in Chicago wove together for you in your life of peacemaking. And so I'm thrilled to be able to have this chance to learn from you over these 6 months where we are overlapping in our director roles and for our lifelong friendship. So I'm grateful to Honor Peace for making this opportunity for us to have a conversation.
Yeah. And as the outgoing director, getting an opportunity to talk with the new executive director of CPT, I couldn't be more pleased than having you join this team a couple of years ago in a different form and now. And So, what's your vision for peacemaking?
Yeah. Well, the way we phrase it within CPT definitely resonates with me. Like envisioning a world of communities that can embrace the diversity of the human family and live justly and peaceably with all creation, for me is really a sense of being able to handle tension well and welcome difference in a way that challenges the way situations that are not geared towards peacemaking see difference. Difference can be seen as a problem, as something to run away from, because our differences, especially when we disagree, can be very hard to handle. But building up communities, building partnerships particularly, to build those communities, participating in those communities that can see conflict as a generative force and hold a lot of tension, can really birth a lot of new things, a lot of ideas that I think at this moment, as in perhaps every moment, the world needs in order for us to live well, all of us, together. Because it really, at this moment, is all of us or none. What about you? As you look over your tenure with CPT, but also the many catalytic experiences that you've had before you came to CPT, what are some ways in which your vision has stayed consistent and some ways in which it's changed?
Interesting. So I've gotten into peacemaking very much part of the church, like from church-based community organizing, accompanying of refugees in Central America during the wars there, all of it very church-based, very based in a theology that looks for liberation for everybody. And that's not changed. One of the things that has grown a lot over the years, over the decades really, is this sense of undoing oppression, the systems of oppression being key to holding war and violence in place, and the need to undo those systems from the inside out and the outside in, all of that together. So that's grown in me during these years. I'd say another thing that has been consistent is a sense that this work we do as peacemakers is a work of prayer. It's a work grounded in faith, in all that is holy, in Jesus for me, but honoring every expression of God and following what is good. We need this is a project that needs all our relations, human and otherwise. And I think that last phrase is something that I'm growing in understanding, that all of our interfaith partnerships and all of the earth and all the creatures of the earth, and seeing creation much more as one than as something split between human and non-human, or us and them, in the very many ways that we're set up to divide.
And I appreciate the way that you mentioned undoing oppressions, growing through, from, and challenging our faith perspectives, and then also how that influences our ethics and tactics, which I would like to go to in a little bit. But just defining oppression in the sense of what we're seeing, what has grown for Christian peacemaker teams, and I believe the movement in general. Oppression being that which has as its root to press. So when we are pressed down and not able to breathe as well. And so the undoing is a sense of creating space for everything to breathe well. That is ruach, that is spirit, that is everything being able to have its full spirit. So in that undoing, there's also a sense of what we're for. So undoing that pressure and being for a depth of openness. And it is painful. Watching, both learning to breathe again, but also watching the ways in which structural oppression, so that is structural violence, the violence that is built into systems of how we value certain people over others, particular status over others, particular qualities over others. So this kind of sense of power over or domination systems, and this type of domination gets encoded in everything that we see, in how it affects people of various ethnic groups, various genders, various orientations, various faiths. When we come together, there are options. There's an option of really learning to breathe together well and seeking out the treasure that the other brings in their vessel, or creating conversations or opportunities that give much more space for a particular expression and very little to other expressions which need to kind of poke their way in. And so one practice that I've appreciated at CPT is that at any time anyone is able to and invited to say ouch, or to say stop, I feel like there's some ways in which deep oppression or structural violence is affecting the way that we work. Even though we work on stopping violence, we have nothing to say anywhere else if we aren't also committed to working on it within us, because I don't just believe that violence is over there in Palestine, where we are accompanying children to and from school via Israeli military checkpoints, or over there in Iraq, where civilians are facing ExxonMobil, which is now going to jeopardize their fresh water sources, or in Canada alongside First Nations, who are resisting still historic deprivation and environmental degradation. Nor is it just in Colombia, where we're assisting folks who are creating peace zones and creating space to farm food well in the face of monocropping corporations. Violence isn't just out there in those places where we work, but violence and nonviolence cut through the heart of each one of us. So I appreciate the way in which Undoing Oppressions draws the best from our faith traditions to help us tackle difficult conversations and to see the image of God in one another, which leads us towards action, which some consider risky or some consider controversial. And you've been able to lead CPT for years now, doing these types of controversial and risky actions that come from this nexus of undoing oppressions and faith. Can you talk about some of those actions and the ways that, despite the controversy, you've been able to make it through and to stand up for what you believe in and to lead in a particular way? Because many people think, hey, CPT is not accessible to me. I can't do that type of thing. What has empowered you to do that? Or what's it been like? And,
So, let me pick a couple of different kinds of actions. So one action when I was a CPT reservist and I served in Colombia, there's sort of one of the sort of classic ways people think about CPT action is this accompanying when vulnerable, when a community is vulnerable to violence. And there were times like that. There were times when we were alerted that the paramilitary were downstream, and we hopped in the canoe and raced downstream to that space. And then engaged these armed paramilitaries, men with families far from where they are, in conversation for hours while the community canoe came back upstream, and they were less likely to harass those civilian brothers and sisters because we're standing right there talking to them about when did they last get to talk to their kids? You know, does the cell phone reach? So there's that kind of action that is both very connecting with the other, the opponent, who's an armed actor and who's threatening a community, but connecting with the human being who is carrying those arms. Another kind of action would be when the Iraq team far away, I'm working in the office in Chicago, and the Iraq team around the other side of the world has called for a fast because they've done a bunch of research, Peggy Gish and Cliff Kindy among them, but others from other parts of the world and the faith community have done this amazing documentation of the situation in U.S. detention centers under U.S. occupation, and of torture and mistreatment. But nobody is listening. They've got the report pulled together in a way that the power brokers, that the decision makers could use it to change the situation, but nobody's opening the door. And they've been trying, and they said, all right, it's Lent, let's fast. And they called the church to fast. And the staff, of course, in the office fasts too. So we're fasting and praying and holding those power brokers as well as the detainees and their families all in prayer. And before Lent was finished, the pictures from Abu Ghraib broke in the press. And then everybody's saying, wasn't there a report about this? And the Congress and the press and all are eating up the documentation that CPT has carefully put together with the families and with the released detainees, the information from those spaces. And the world is noticing, and things actually shift some. So an action of prayer supporting and solidarity. And another kind of action that comes to mind, a very different kind of action, is an action that CPT and at least one other organization has had at Church of the Brethren and Mennonite Church USA annual conferences, or biannual conferences, depending on the tradition, where during times when the denominations were not finding a way to make space for LGBTQ and ally folks to really be present and speak their part. CPT has been one of the bodies, in my body and in many other bodies, that have figured out a way to stand with and to give space on our table or to be with in the speaking of those groups. So there's the transformation of the church and the transformation of the world and the transformation of us. And sometimes that's civil disobedience in a store that is supporting that monocropping company in Colombia, and sometimes that's being actually present in one of those situations of dire oppression and violence where CPT's projects are. Sometimes it's making a call or writing a letter. And you know, we can all do some piece of that. And certainly, I hope everyone who's watching this will join us in prayer. Definitely. And that is not in prayer at least. That's the core. That's the ground we stand on.
Thank you so much for sharing those stories and the intention behind those stories, the intention of transformation. You named 3 areas: transformation of faith communities, transformation of our work-life communities, and transformation of the self. Again, that really resonates with this sense of faith-based work, nonviolent direct action in many forms, and undoing oppressions. So it's interesting how those overlay together with that kind of solid 3 base, which for me, in many ways, resonates with the sense of the Trinity and this hospitality and community, and a very dynamic a force that can find unity and diversity, and that provides a space of welcome, provides a space of embrace and challenge, and a container with which to hold this loving kindness, steadfast loving kindness that we have access to all over in the world, but definitely coming to us through the divine. There is a way in which this work, I definitely speak about this work of administration that we do as a ministry. And of course, the root word of administration has that minister part to it. That always reminds me that, especially when I see, wow, there's way more work than I could ever do, it reminds me to follow that call, that this is a call on my life. It's not an office job in a particular understanding of it. Rather, it's a part of a vocation which can help me live out and orient towards building partnerships to transform the violence and oppression that I see, that plague our world, or that seek to press us down and tell us to simply conform. Rather, as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would call us to be creatively maladjusted to that conformist society. And I definitely think there's a lot of creative maladjustment within CPT. Definitely, I find this is an organization where people can bring all of themselves, and it's a perk. We write it on our invitations for employment, the chance to work with a bunch of quirky peacemakers. I mean, we definitely don't all have it together, or have it all together either. But just the chance to give it a try and to keep working at it. Which is why I really like nonviolence in general, because I want to be passionate, I want to be loud, I want to be able to stand up for what I believe in. And, you know, I may also be wrong. And so as long as I remain committed to not eliminating my conversation partners, there's a chance that as I find out more, and if I am wrong, I can circle back and ask forgiveness. I can confess to them what I've learned. And also then remembering that there's no one that I can't learn something from within our organization or with anyone or any being that I interact with. And so seeking for that learning, that we might apply it well and to do our work always better is something that's very motivating to me as I do this administration type work. So it's been really enjoyable so far, because there have been so many learnings and people are bringing so many gifts. So just figuring out how to organize that and make those connections has been really meaningful to me.
Yeah, one of the things I love about working with CPT is that I get to work with some of the most amazing people I've ever met or imagined. the diversity of the people who are part of CPT's core, who go on delegations, and who are our partners. The courage out of very, not this like superhuman, extra special, not like me kind of a way, but that just comes out of people having decided to live in liberating love, decided to live in a way that's going to change the world to make a space for everybody. It's just so inspiring.
Yeah, and the genius of each of us, each of the people watching, all of us is needed at this time. One question that On Earth Peace is asking us to answer is, what is one of these most pressing issues that we see right now? And when I was contemplating this question, one of the things that immediately breaks my heart is the profits on arms trade, on weapons trading, and the profits of war, and the profit incentives, the economic incentives to continue to sell guns or weapons of mass destruction and continue to use the ingenuity, innovation that people have been given for the purposes of shutting down that diversity because it's too hard to tolerate or there's too much challenge. It makes me want to weep, and instead of weeping, trying to use that sadness to recognize it, to sit with it, and then convert it to fuel, just breathing into it and convert it into the fuel that I need to get up every morning and say, let me get back at that work, and invite people to share some of their profit instead with an organization that's committed to not selling weapons, but committed to trying to muddle through, as I've heard you say, slowly but surely towards ways in which we can address and resolve conflict, even the most difficult conflict, without relying on the threat of violence or elimination if a way through isn't found. So what are you seeing now as you transition out as some of the most pressing issues?
Well, one of the things I've kind of constantly been called back to by our partners is very, very frequently what they're standing up for is their community and the earth and the land that is in their care. And the way people who are so direly oppressed have not lost track of the fact that this is one whole. This earth and us is one whole. And that's like even those of us with the props of a failing perhaps, but still functioning capitalist system supporting us, are starting to notice that that's at risk. We're all at risk. And the war machine that is a huge part of that degradation. And so is that kind of corporate power that machine supports for the whole, on the whole. So ending war and ending oppression will go a long ways to having the earth, the people will be able to care for the earth. We will be able to care for the earth. Yeah, that's what feels, what I've come to see as that whole that is the urgent place to hold it all together. I'm wondering how you see what CPT brings in that picture of the larger movement toward good and justice and peacemaking. Where's our piece of heading in a direction of a world that really works for everybody?
I think one of CPT's pieces of the puzzle would be in our training. So coming out of this type of question, which was one of the sparks for CPT, what if those committed to peace were willing to train for it as much as those committed to war making train for it? And then accompanying question about, willing to give of our life energy towards this, not just as a recreational hobby, but one in which doing solidarity work as if our life depended on it, because it does. So that kind of initiating challenge, rephrased how I've rephrased it, I think that CPT has really grasped onto that idea and developed a type of training that invites people to look very deeply inside themselves and very deeply inside the life of the world. And very deeply inside the life of our stories. And so I think that's a big piece of the puzzle, because going through a training like that, currently in its form now, it's a month long, and it involves personality analysis, group dynamic analysis, paying attention to undoing oppressions, and not just one oppression, but how oppressions and structural violence are linked. Doing role plays. So not just talking about difficult situations, but putting our bodies in the bodies of different roles within a conflict moment and seeing what happens. So using the tools from Theater of the Oppressed or popular education throughout this month. And there are many other things, prayer and song and time for questions and sharing life stories and this
scriptural basis for nonviolence.
Absolutely. There's so much in there that through that process, it brings people to asking stronger questions of themselves, of their stories, of the world, and prepares them for the type of situations that we face. A number of times when things happen, let's say at protests or in other things, people look to CPTers because training makes a difference. And a number of times I've already heard people talking about, we need some help, let's call a CPTer. And while we are not going to start a project in any new area necessarily right now, just having a CPTer there can help raise the caliber of the types of questions we're asking, of the types of the ways we're thinking tactically. And so I think that's what CPT has to offer the movement at this time is really the way that we're training. And even as we, as CPT, continue to grow and think about the ways in which we can make this training more accessible, and we recognize we don't have the only training out there and we're learning from one another, our consciousness about being well trained to do this work, and also our consciousness about not repressing any questions we have, either about the organization or elsewhere, I think that can help feed really well. And I appreciate being a part of an administration, a part of a support team that welcomes the questions, that will sit with them, even if we can't necessarily respond right away or resolve it. For me, it's been a good example of servant leadership and at least like a prayerful consideration of what folks are bringing. So we're always on a journey with those types of things, and each of our perspectives are different, and sometimes we feel, we didn't get that right, so we're not doing well. But even learning from elders within the CPT movement, such as Hedy Sawatsky, who was been at it for a long time. She just helped me so much to be able to embrace any pieces of even the shadow side of CPT and just kind of welcome it all and just dance with everything. So I think that's a model. I think organizationally that's a model, and in the future I hope to see us become even more robust with our ability to do that.
Yeah. I think that CPT's really strong decision to put Undoing Racism, starting with Undoing Racism, as an organization that started among mostly white North Americans, it was really important to start at that place in our Undoing Oppressions journey, and then to work, as you said, at those interplay of oppressions, the places where they tangled together. The way that teams have developed structures for checking in on undoing oppressions, for continuing to learn, not as something that just is a one-time training, but then you're done, but something that's incorporated into team life. And I think that's something that CPT really can offer back to the church as a model, or as a practice to consider.
Can you talk a little bit more about that, how for you as a white North American person that has kept you involved? And so many people get demoralized when they hear about undoing racism, undoing oppressions work, but you get more energized. Tell me about that.
Oh my goodness. It's like, what a difference it makes to move out of this place of fear. Oh my, I'm going to get it wrong, and then I will be determined to be a bad person. You know, that's sort of what racism teaches white people. You have to get it exactly right. And you won't, is the reality. So then you must be evil in some way. But Undoing Racism journey says, oops, well, let's see what we can learn from this. Let me see, what are the ways I can shift? Are there things I can do to make up for that mistake I just made that fell hard on you? It's a journey that gives me tools and a different way of looking at things that is much more filled with grace than the system of racism has taught. Like, none of us volunteered for that system. But you have to choose to undo it. And white folks get free when we undo racism. It's not for the global majority only that needs to be an emphasis. The straight community will get free when heterosexism that oppresses LGBTQ folks is dismantled. Men will live a much better life without patriarchy and sexism. It's getting better. Yeah. How about you?
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for that answer. And I mean that's one reason. I think that many up-and-coming young leaders of color are actually attracted to CPT because it's a space where we don't have to introduce the conversation around racism. It's already alive and well, and we can feed our piece into it and change it and affect it and challenge ourselves on at this particular moment. How are we also complicit or going to resist, systems of power and privilege? How we look at our own kind of particular situation, and so that's really exciting to come into a conversation that's already live. And I see this sparking up many places, and to be able to again have that training and background and encouragement to speak up about it is really, really great. That's definitely one way. So to be able to be in a place where when people say something about oppression, it's not considered a conversation stopper.
Yes.
But an opener to a deeper conversation, or a conversation in addition to that, or a conversation that affects the other conversation, that is really exciting.
Yeah.
For me, as someone who grew up half African American, half white Mennonites, and both of those at the same time, I found myself kind of walking on a border all of my life. And so undoing oppressions and looking at the ways in which identity is structured has given me language for figuring out how and who I can be in the world, both as an individual, but also as an individual part of multiple communities. And so looking at power dynamics within those communities. So it's been a lifesaver for me in a way. And for me, it's also a deep spiritual practice. I mean, growing up as a biracial person and kind of walking on borders and crossing boundaries all the time, undoing oppressions has given me language and tools for working that out and figuring out who I am as an individual within, despite, because of my various communities, and looking at power dynamics within those places. And also the practice of undoing oppressions for me also is a spiritual practice, because in many ways it's not a linear practice, but really a type of spiral walk, let's say, in which you come around to similar situations, but if you have been intentional in your walk, that same situation is not exactly the same as it was last time. There's a little more glimmer of hope or an idea or grace that's accessible. It was always accessible, but I hadn't opened the door of my mind's heart to see it. And the next time around, you can open a little more, and then that next time around. And even then, when things fall on me in a hard way, I also, within undoing oppressions and as a spiritual practice, have spirit to lean into. So as I handle a lot of tension and hold it, I also have this sense that I'm held, and that there's something beyond a right and a wrong in this work, but that which can help bind us together in love and make those types of connections rather than pressing us down is spirit. And I have just been so inspired by the example of Jesus in this work, as well as many other teachers. But as I'm starting this executive director work at age 30, and since CPT terms are 3 years long, renewable, you have heard me joke, I call these my Jesus years. So it's been really fun to kind of look at Jesus' years of public ministry and try to follow that model. And over, I see how much fun he had in this work, calling people to come join with this sense of renewal that he was pointing towards, and the revelation that he embodied, and inviting them to see that revelation that they were also embodying, and really for a revolution of values, of one that says things are perfect, whole, and complete as they are now, and yet we need to keep moving together because there is oppression and evil and that which seeks to close us in. So kind of this practice of community building, reaching out to those who are near, reaching out to those who are far off, and in his body, breaking down dividing walls, and having the courage and knowing that as he held phenomenal amounts of tension, he was also held, and he also experienced the forsakenness of that, but yet followed his calling no matter what the cost, because trusting in that death and destruction does not have that final word. Yeah. And so in every situation we face, be it small on a daily level or very large in terms of things breaking apart or burning to a crisp, I can trust in that process and really see the miraculous aspects of this one wild and crazy life that we have. Anyway, that was a long and winding answer, but it's okay.
That's how life is.
It's been fun, and also to have the opportunity to say, hey, before Jesus really got into it, he took some time in the wilderness.
Yeah.
And so telling you that I wanted to begin my term as executive director by going into the wilderness and having that understood was really meaningful. Yeah. And it was quite a meaningful wilderness time, just learning what I can from the places that have nurtured me spiritually and in my activism, and spending time with the land itself and water and fire and the air, the elements, and what stories they have to share, and also facing my own personal temptations and challenges. It was just a real blessing to be able to do that. And when I came back for orientation, things got moving really quickly. Yeah. But I think one of the only reasons I'm not overwhelmed already is because I took that time in the wilderness beforehand and kind of got my orientation and like Jesus, I hope to continually return to those places of prayer and sanctuary to really reground and envision what it is I am to do for the organization at this time, and what I can learn from the different offerings people are bringing.
Yeah.
So Honors Peace has asked us to speak about one person that has inspired us in building peace, and so I wanted just to say you're one of those people that has inspired me in building peace. And one of the ways that you have shown that is in the way that you pray. And so I would just invite you to pray for us now, for those who are watching and our partners, and whatever else is on your heart, because I think your example of prophetic prayer is one that I will always want to remember, and I'm so glad that we can even capture it here on tape, so I might be able to check it out.
Sure.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
So whatever way you all pray, go ahead and join us. God, you are full of power. You have chosen to wrap us into your will and your way, into your project of healing this earth, of healing humanity, of healing all. Thank you. And I pray for everyone who watches this video, for everyone who works on it, for everyone who shares it. God, whatever you are calling them into in this holy work of nonviolence, this holy work of mending and of bringing wholeness, let them hear that call. If it's a delegation or a donation, if it's a work of advocacy, picking up the phone or writing an email, if it's a neighborhood outreach or a speaking up of truth in the congregation, whatever you're calling people to, I ask for a blessing on that and on them. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. Yeah.